Since the days of the hunter-gatherers, human survival depended on what you could do and how well you could do it. Human communities thrived when labour was shared and skills were divvied up and assigned to those most suitable for the job. And with the agricultural revolution came more settled societies. Societies that were allowed to develop when individuals could learn to specialise. And with that, the trades were born. And with every technological advancement and societal shift, from the invention of farming to the Industrial Revolution, some jobs would be made redundant, and those skills, once thought so crucial, would be lost to time. Almost. I've come to Chalke History Festival, the largest history festival in the UK, where every year in this valley, living historians gather to live, work and eat as those people from history did, keeping those crucial skills of the past alive. And I've come to try them for myself. And at the end, I'll be placing each role on a tier list, based on things like physical difficulty, technical skill, workplace conditions, salary, status, and also crucially, whether I think I can actually do it, just in case this whole presenter thing's a bust.
So how are you actually feeling about it?
Fine, I think, fine. A wee bit nervous, I think, but you know, realistically, like, they're not gonna throw me into the deep end, right? Our first job goes way back to a time before jobs even formally existed, to the Neolithic period. Drawing on the most recent academic research in archaeology, renowned prehistory educator Sally Pointer is here today to bring to life the Neolithic and early Bronze Age, and she's going to show me the 5,000-year-old craft of cordage weaving.
I'm Sally Pointer, I'm an experimental archaeologist, and we're looking at life in the Stone Age. One of the most important things in prehistory is the development of string, cordage, and ultimately things like basketry and weaving. And we can trace this back a really long time. We've got evidence that over 120,000 years ago, shells are being strung on material that is probably string rather than things like leather thonging. And we also know that people are working with their environments. They're working with materials like lime bast, which is the inner bark of a tree, and things like flax, which is initially wild, but becomes probably one of the very first things we bring into cultivation as the agricultural revolution takes place. Cordage and things made out of it can make so much of the perishable material culture of prehistory. When we look at archaeology, of course, the first things that we've lost are the culture, and then the things that are part of everyday life, the things that just turn to compost. So we have nets and baskets made out of cordage. My clothing is sewn together. Weaving develops probably about 27,000 years ago and just gets more and more advanced as we move into the Neolithic and ultimately the Bronze Age.
And was this a set of skills that everybody needed to be able to do to an extent, or was it reserved for specialists?
I think that most people would have been able to make string. If I give you an extremely quick demonstration, I'll show you why I think that. So this is just a little bit of lime bast. And I'm just going to make, without any real finesse, a little bit of cordage. And cordage can be as simple as something that just helps you tie things together. Imagine you've been out and you've found the most wonderful bunch of, wild carrots. So you've dug up loads and loads of wild carrots and there's more than you can hold in your hands to bring back. Well, if you can knock together a bit of cordage, you can tie them together by the leafy tops, bring home a huge bundle. Right, this is almost at the length I wanted to show you. Okay, so if we look at this piece of cordage, there's a little starting loop, and this end I can keep adding to forever if I want to. But what I wanted to show you was that if I poke the live end through the loop and just pull that through, bear in mind this is a short bit, what I've made there is a snare. So we think cordage develops out of very early hunting strategies. Once people have discovered that you can make loops that move, it's only one stage to making looped bags, slightly tougher ones like baskets, even my hairnet, which is one continuous piece of string. It's I've reached the age where a lady with a bag on her head is a great look. And also, if I found the world's greatest hazelnut tree, I've got a little carrying basket with me. And all the things that we think of as being modern cloth and clothing, they evolve out of these early technologies. We've always had specialists. We've always had people who've got a knack for one thing over another. And some of the textiles that we do see preserved in the archaeological record are so beautifully made. They're not beginner's work.
Bit of a strange question, I suppose, but what kind of traits do you think that you would need to survive or kind of thrive in a society like this?
You've got to be very adaptable. You've got to be able to look at a resource in the landscape and say, I can see exactly what I can do with that. There are so many things out there that have something you can eat, something you can turn into later materials, something you can store for later. And one thing that I think it's really important to remember is that something like my hairnet, which took about 3 days to make, including making the cordage as I went along. Well, at this time of year, that would be a terrible thing to work on. There's so much I should be doing. There's things to be picking. If we're farming, there are things to weed. There are animals with young to tend. So much. It's a perfect thing to do in the middle of winter, though. However, if I wanted to make this in the middle of winter, at the right time of year, I have to gather the materials and make them safe, put them by so that I have them available, so that I can stay in out of the cold and the wet and work on something that probably stops me going a bit stir crazy when it's really filthy out, but then gives me something I can wear for years to come. The easiest way to start making a piece of cordage is to hold your fibres in the middle so they look a bit like a comedy moustache, which gives us the opportunity to do the comedy moustache, but why wouldn't we? Why not? And then tip your hand sideways so that you end up with a top strand and a bottom strand. Mm-hmm. Your top strand you're going to twist away from you.
Okay.
And then with any of your spare fingers, grab the bottom strand so that you can pull the twisty bit towards you and down.
Towards me and down.
Like that. Perfect. And then this little pinch, you can just bring to support it. Now that's your top strand.
Oh, okay. What I'm doing here is simply making basic cordage. It's relaxing and meditative. It's also really quite straightforward, and I was surprised to pick it up quite easily, with Sally's help, of course. It's also very light on physical effort. I could probably do this for hours without breaking a sweat, honestly. I did it.
Dad, I've made it.
I've made it. However, Sally pointed out that you couldn't survive on cordage weaving alone. Everyone in Neolithic society was expected to do this to some extent. I'd also be building, farming, hunting and labouring to keep myself alive, likely with no improvement to my social status.
So like many crafts from the deep past, it's not difficult. What it is time consuming. And we find that quite hard to understand today because we're conditioned to think in terms of wages per hour.
Yep.
And the concept of a little hairnet that takes 3 days to make seems unbelievably alien to us today. But in a world where objects are part of your survival strategy, but also the things that make you comfortable and help denote your status, things that take time are worth it. They're absolutely worth it.
I don't have too much confidence in my ability to go full-time hunter-gatherer, so I'm going to score this low on the could I actually do it factor. If it was just cordage, I'd be sitting pretty, but like Sally says, this was something everyone had to be able to do. I wouldn't get any credit for doing this, so it's a no from me. Gonna give this a C tier. Our next job sees us jumping forward thousands of years to the medieval era. In the 13th century, society has become more stratified, and our use of tools more sophisticated. In fact, medieval society had started to bring metal luxury items and bespoke crockery into the household, which brings us to Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom from Heritage Blades. I'm here at Chalke History Festival making medieval cutlery. So the typical day in the life of a medieval cutler would start like many other people. They'd be getting up, of course, getting themselves ready, going to the workshop and seeing what needs to be done. So a cutler will be gathering materials to be making the knives and the cutlery that they will be doing. Some of them would make a lot of the parts themselves, but many actually would have commissioned pieces from, say, a hafter for a handle or a bladesmith for the actual blade of the knife, or even some more exotic materials from jewelers and goldsmiths and silversmiths. So they'd probably start their day gathering all of those materials before setting about actually constructing the knives they're going to be selling.
And what was the social standing of a medieval cutler?
The social standing of medieval cutlers were not entirely certain. They are metal workers, they are making some very beautiful items, so sometimes they can be quite high standing. You could almost class them in those levels of goldsmiths and the likes, but others, it seems, depending on when in history you're looking at, they are just people making utility tools, and sometimes not anything particularly special, but certainly higher than just your average day labourer. So mastering the craft of being a medieval cutler would be a lot like other crafts at this time, you'd be looking at an apprenticeship of, say, about 7 to 13 years, depending on where. That would get you to being a journeyman, where you'd be expected to travel and learn from other master cutlers. And we estimate that that time of traveling and working in other places would be somewhere around potentially 10 years. So if you were in England starting as young as 7 years old, which sometimes people did, you could look at being about 30 by the time you're a master cutler. Working in a cutler's workshop itself could actually be quite a dangerous place. Some of the tasks are quite simple, but you have to appreciate there will be processes like grinding metal, iron and steel. And we know throughout history, jobs that involved that, before you have modern ventilation, can dramatically reduce your lifespan, which is why you don't necessarily want to be doing that yourself. Give it to maybe a specialist grinder to sit there and do that work instead. Some of the materials as well that a cutler could be working with could expose them to dangerous chemicals, such as if they're gold leafing things, they're dissolving gold in mercury and then basically evaporating the mercury off the metal to apply that gold leaf. But again, sometimes it's better to let other people do that for you instead. So if they're canny, they can probably last a long time.
Was there a benefit to a cutler being skilled in warfare?
Now, cutlers would potentially make items that would be used for warfare, military items such as swords and daggers. I mean, the word cutler is essentially someone who makes things that cut. And potentially they could be seen as one of those craftspeople who would be more valued not being sent to fight, instead being kept back to make the items. However, we know craftspeople did follow armies on campaigns, because if you do that, you have access to all these people who need your services. And one of the roles of a cutler would also be sharpening, polishing, and refurbishing equipment.
So being a cutler in some ways could save you from having to do the actual fighting.
Working as a cutler could keep you from essentially going out and having to fight. It's very unlikely you would be forced to go to fight a campaign for someone. You'd probably have that choice to actually sign up onto a military campaign. So if you're not a very successful cutler, then perhaps a little bit of military service might seem quite tempting, but it seems to have been that a cutler is quite a secure job once you're in it.
So you'd potentially recommend that I become a medieval cutler?
I'd recommend being a medieval cutler if you can work to high tolerances and have a high threshold for boredom sometimes.
Neither of those things. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. For obvious reasons, I didn't get to actually try this. We don't have that kind of insurance. However, it did seem like the kind of thing that, with time and dedication, I could maybe pick up. The job varies highly in terms of status. You could make a decent living making equipment for the military, or dedicate yourself to making luxury items, comparable to a goldsmith. You could also avoid military service as a cutler, since you had a skill that made you too valuable to see combat, which, as a professional coward, is a massive plus for me. Additionally, it was a job for life, as you'd likely be a master by the time you started to age out of the role, teaching a team of apprentices to do the difficult stuff. That said, the workplace was dangerous. Noxious materials and fumes, poorly ventilated working conditions could significantly shorten your lifespan. Clever masters would outsource the most dangerous work to the newbies, but you'd have to get there first. Plus, there's the day-to-day risk of cuts, burns and impacts from working with forged metal, not to mention the heat. I was stood next to Tom for about an hour, and that was more than enough for me. Overall, I'd give the cutler an A. It scores highly on most ranks, but it's a tough job that can shorten your life and stain your clothes. And honestly, I don't cope well with anything over room temperature. Next up, we're heading back to the Iron Age, but moving away from the forge and to something a little more decorative. We don't typically think of the Iron Age society as having an eye for aesthetics, but our next job would prove otherwise.
Hi, I'm Caroline and I'm an Iron Age colour merchant. A dye is usually a colour extracted from a living material. Plants, so leaves, roots, sometimes even insects like cochineal, for example. But that colour is soluble in water and goes within the material, and you use a mordant to fixate it. So when we wash our modern clothes, or mine, the colour doesn't come off. But for paints, especially in my time, and still fairly traditionally, we use mineral colours, so rocks, clays, earths, sands. They all come from minerals, and this one is something that people find in the nearby area and all around the UK. It's an ironstone. So it's iron ore, we call it hematite.
It's redder than I anticipated.
It is. Sometimes it's just very, very grey. But they are slightly purplish. You dip it in water, up. You take a scratchy stone,
Oh, I see.
And the red pigment comes out.
What's actually producing the pigment?
It's iron oxide in the rocks.
I see.
So the majority of these colors, be it the red, the yellow, the orange, the purples and the oranges, they're all iron oxide, so natural rusts. So I can show you how to make some tempera paint, some traditional historical egg paint using egg yolk, mixed with water that makes the natural glue, and that sticks the mineral pigment of our choice to the wall. I'm using chicken eggs here. We have chickens in the very, very, very late Iron Age in Britain. You could have used duck eggs, goose, any kind of fowl and wild birds as well. As long as it's for small quantities, maybe not the entire wall. I mean, you could technically use the entire egg, but the proper recipe for tempera is just the egg yolk, which contains all the proteins and the fats from the egg. So we end up with yoink, boop, a little egg yolk. So that has a membrane around. We don't really want to use that membrane. I'd like just to have the egg yolk that comes out of it. If it's a lot of egg yolk, then it will be very glossy and fairly thicker paint. If it's a lot of water, then it will be, well, pretty translucent and fairly liquid. So you can really adapt. I'm going to add roughly at the starter the same amount of water. But as you can see, it really isn't precise at all. I like the paint to be slightly runny. Now that will dry fairly translucent, but will glue our pigment powder, our rock dust, onto the wall. We have a bit of a job for you actually. I forgot some of the lines on the outside of the house, so we'll use some of that simply sieved purple ochre, purple pigment. I like to saturate my paints with pigments. You get really your pigment into it. So now my problem is tempera is fairly translucent and transparent a paint. So what I want to add is a little bit of chalk powder, which we have a lot of here. That will be a filler, which means it will make the paint very opaque, a bit like a gouache, instead of being a watercolor.
I see.
Now, I don't have any precise quantities. I should, but I don't, because again, I'm very lazy.
It's more art than science.
But straight away, because of chalk powder, you have a much more pastel, maybe, finish. So, mix, mix, mix. Let's try it again. So I'll do that. I'll just saturate it a bit more because, again, I really like when it's opaque. And if it was a really rare, a really expensive pigment, I would very much make sure that I use small quantities. But as I gathered this one myself, and it's dramatically easy to process, it's actually not an expensive pigment, even if it's purple. That's the misconception we have. If I dyed my cloth purple, whoa, that would be another question altogether. But as a paint, really accessible.
So there was a big difference in terms of, I suppose, the value and status ascribed to dyes versus paints?
Yes. Well, I would think so. For example, dyeing cloth in blue with woad, really simple, well, a long process, but you can do it and you can make it even bluer, darker by having repetitive dye baths. But finding a blue mineral to actually make a paint, I would have to go to Belgium. That would be the closest. The Romans mention a mine of azurite, which is really, really blue, and they use it for posh ladies' makeup in Rome. I know a lot of people think that in the Iron Age, you know, you have the myth of the blue painted Celt. It's not everybody under the sun. It's really in the northern borders, Scotland and the borders, it seems. Well, they say the northern Britons. And weirdly, it seems to come from a mistranslation of Julius Caesar's text that mentions the word vitro in Latin, which absolutely does not mean woad at all. Could potentially mean blue, but it is not woad. Weirdly, we find this translation around the 1580s, 1590s in England, where the woad trade is absolutely destroyed by during the Indigo Wars, when newly imported indigo powder, well, indigo dye, from Asia is bluer, cheaper, easier to use. Could have been a big marketing coup, saying your ancestors used locally grown wood, should do it.
So as a Scot, that image of my ancestors being clad in blue paint, probably a big lie.
Probably a big myth. Hollywood has a lot to answer for that, really.
Yes, it does.
And who would check a translation that has been made in the 16th century? I mean, that sounds a bit difficult. On the other hand, we do think that they were painting themselves for special occasions, maybe not all the time. And there are some early medieval mentions and comparison in text and in the Book of Kells, actually. It seems to be red. So that has a very big visual impact, and it seems to be red, iron red. So hematite that we find again everywhere, especially in Scotland, from the Orkneys in the Neolithic, hematite everywhere, to Wales in the Bronze Age, and the only painted item we have from Iron Age Britain, 300 BC, the Enderby shield was painted red with hematite again. So red is an absolute constant, and to be honest with you, it does stain very, very well. All right, so I will also give you one of these lovely reconstructed paintbrushes.
Please, thank you very much.
That's pig hair. No animals were harmed, it got an apple, and I had a good pair of scissors. And apart from testing it on the wall, there's nothing else to do.
Perfect.
So here you go.
Thank you very much.
It's really precise, it's so neat. It's going to be neater than the other side of the house.
My mum used to shout at me for painting on the walls.
Really?
Yeah.
This is all you've ever wanted to do.
Yeah. Okay, the colour merchant is a strong contender. Sourcing your own pigments was a job in and of itself, involving some real detective work. You had to travel, network for local secrets, and source your minerals based on rumour and knowledge of the local area. This kind of lifestyle could absolutely be a job for life, and it was relatively safe. Sourcing the correct paint pigments could be traded for valuable resources and information, especially if you travelled to places where your pigments couldn't be found more locally. So travel, money, safety and status are all scoring highly. Plus, who doesn't love a bit of painting? Look at me, this was like the most relaxed I'd been all weekend. We're doing all right?
Yeah.
I really want to do a good job. So right from the jump, I'm putting the colour merchant into S tier, and it's already looking like the one to beat. However, we've a few more jobs to go. We're now leaping forward to the Middle Ages, where the feudal system has cemented the hierarchy that would shape the medieval world. Warfare has become more sophisticated and lucrative, meaning artisans of equipment and weaponry have never been more necessary. Enter Stan.
Hi, I'm Stan. I'm portraying a mail worker here in 1215.
Talk me through a typical day in the life of a mail worker.
In the morning, you get into your workshop. One of the first things you'll be doing is setting up your forge for the day. You're going to be putting links in the forge to anneal and leaving them to cool through the day. You want to monitor that in case of fires, which is obviously a hazard at the time. The next task for a mail worker would be preparing links to weave for the day. It would vary day to day, but in this scenario, we're going to go through the whole process of everything they might be doing. So those links need to be flattened, and they come out something like this. Then you punch holes in them, and then you can start weaving those. Weaving could be done by a series of people working for you. Quite often they'd have someone who they're training up to be a mail worker in their employment or in their care. They'd weave the big sheets, and then maybe the more senior member would tailor those sheets into functional bits of armour.
What was the social standing that you could expect as a mail worker?
You're looking at a professional craftsperson, someone who really knows their trade, might have a relatively high status position, working for a specific individual. What you'll find is if someone has someone who is their mail maker, they sort of become an extension of them in the same way that most other servants would. This changes through time. When mail becomes more prevalent on the battlefield, they are basically like any other town-dwelling person.
Were there any accidents in the workplace? How safe of a job was it?
Well, I mentioned at the start of the day, you're starting a fire to anneal your mail rings. And that's a step you're repeating throughout the process of making mail. And obviously there's the hazards that come with that. One of the most common injuries you see are actually striking yourself with a hammer. Sometimes mail makers would develop joint problems in their hands from the continuous use of various pliers. Hammer strikes, especially riveting, can be quite strenuous on the grip.
So, given the opportunity in this time, would you recommend being a mail maker?
It's a skill trade. It would have paid quite well. Mail hauberk would have been very expensive, I think. So presumably, you're able to make some money from that. It's quite safe in the sense that you'll be providing weapons and arms to people, and therefore you'll like to be valued in a context where those are being used, especially in a society which is quite violent and turbulent, such as early 13th century England.
And my final question is, what kind of traits do you need to be a successful mail maker?
Really, the main thing is a persistence, a patience, and an attention to detail. You've got to be able to reproduce the same thing over and over again in a reality where uniformity is hard to come by. So it's a repetitive task. You've got to be able to just keep doing it.
Patience, persistence, and attention to detail.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
No less of that.
Mail making, as well as being very satisfying to watch, had a number of things going for it. Compared to the Cutler, the workplace was a lot safer due to being more ventilated and the lack of noxious chemicals being released in the annealing process. Being a mail maker was also highly sought after, given how popular mail would prove during this time. And being a mail maker meant that you'd be too valuable to be sent to war, and would often enjoy lucrative pay, with the option of becoming a master after 10 years in the job. Masters were then able to pick up apprentices, meaning you could outsource the more difficult parts of the role to someone younger and more fit. Ideal. However, it was hard, repetitive work. Annealing the links from the forge presented a constant risk of fires, and there was no avoiding the hammer impacts, joint problems, and repetitive strain injuries from working on a task like this for so long, for many hours of the day, for many days of the week. There's also the question of having to stay focused with precise attention to detail on the same job for hours at a time, and honestly, I don't know if I have the patience. Despite all of its advantages, mailmaking gets a B from me. We're leaving the forge behind as we step into the age of discovery, where empires were built upon great ships crossing uncharted waters previously thought beyond reach. And it's in that time of trade, expansion, and wealth where we meet Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Lisco and I'm the Historical Sailmaker.
So can you talk me through a typical day in the life of a sailmaker?
It's fairly much the same all the way through, from something like 1200 through to 1700. The sailmaker's life is going to be the same. You have two types of sailmaker. You have a sailmaker that's ashore and a sailmaker that would be on board a ship. The sailmaker ashore would be at work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they would be working most of the time on their knees. Without any pads, they'll be just crawling around on their knees, marking out sails on the floor. A set of people would then be hand sewing, seaming the sails. They would also have another group of people that would be putting a bolt rope on, and there would be another group of people that would be putting the eyelets and the finishing touches on to that sail. Most sailmakers would stay in that same area of the job, so you wouldn't have a sailmaker that did everything, although they could. Once they had their job, their role, they would stay in it.
So what was the social standing of a sailmaker during that time?
The master sailmaker, the person that would be in charge of the loft, would very much be of a level that would be out for meals with some of the hierarchy. He'll be liaising with captains and some of the heads of the dockyard, so they would have a pretty high social standing, and that would be shown in the clothing they wear. They'd have the height of fashion. When you get down to the sailmaker on the floor, so to speak, they'd have very threadbare clothes. Their wage coming in wouldn't be particularly high, so they would be living hand to mouth, as we say.
Typically, how long does it take to become a master sailmaker?
To get there, you would generally be looking something like 25 years to become a master sailmaker.
Was it a physically demanding job to be a sailmaker?
Sailmaking is a physically hard job. Not only is it a work on your knees, your hands are constantly being used. The sails, the weight of a piece of cloth is incredibly heavy, and you'll be carrying that often on your shoulder. So you'd end up with back problems as well by sitting on a low bench, generally working. So yes, it is a physically demanding job.
Typically, how is the knowledge passed down among sailmakers?
So if your father was a sailmaker, you would become a sailmaker, and you would start from around the age of 7, where you would go with the sailmaker, your father, to the loft, and your job would be to tidy up, pick up threads, thread needles, and generally be an assistant. And just by being there, you would become immersed in what was happening, and you'd start to see how jobs are done. With that, you would also be taught some of the nuances. So if your father did a particular stitch and it wasn't the same as the sailmaker next door who also taught his son, chances are that stitch has been taught back from father to son all the way through. And often you can see that if I've looked at an old sail in France, for example, and I look at an old sail from England, there are just slight differences that I can recognise, but most people wouldn't. And I suspect that's where those skills have been brought down the line. So we were talking earlier about some of the skills you'd learn as a youngster going to work with your father. And we'll go through some of those very simple things. So we have our sailcloth here, and what we're going to do is to join two pieces of cloth. So we're going to take our cloth and we're just going to put a fold into it like that. And the fold, we don't have rulers or measurements, so it's your thumb distance, as you can see. And then putting it down on the table. This would normally be done on the floor, but we're saving your knees at this point in time.
Thank you.
And then you'll have a little seam rubber, which you've got one there. This one's older than your one, but you're just going to rub that along the seam. So you're also going to take your other piece and do exactly the same.
Okay.
What the rubbing does is it makes a line. The line is here, which means you don't need a pencil. Makes life a lot easier.
I love this.
Isn't it lovely?
Yeah.
It really is lovely. So we're going to put those together, and now next thing you want your needle and your thread. I've already threaded it for you, and then you have a piece of wax, and you're going to run the needle through the wax.
Okay.
So keep the needle out, but the thread, so I should have said run the thread through.
Oh, I see.
You just pull the thread through. That's it, keep going. Yeah, do it 3 or 4 times. And
Idea is to coat it with a layer of wax, right?
with the beeswax, absolutely. And what that does is it stops the thread being fluffy, but it also waterproofs the thread. On your hand, you have a palm, giving you a modern palm. This is an older palm. This one's actually my grandfather's, and it's really nice that I'm still able to use it. My earlier one is just a piece of leather. So picking up your 2 pieces of cloth, you're just going to put them together. Remember, your fold makes a lovely, nice line. So you're gonna hold them in your left hand together. So with your needle, in your hand, you're going to just push it through, and you're going to go in a tiny amount, minding your finger at the other side. As soon as you've got the tip in, you're going to use this part of your palm to gently push it through. It's weird. It's an odd feeling, but it's very good. So the other side, you pull the thread out the other side, and you want to leave around about 3 inches tail. Keep pulling. That's it. That's lovely. And to start off, we're going to do exactly the same again. And pull it through. But you'll see that you've got this loop as you're pulling it. And you just need to make sure that the loop is not tangled up in your tail and that it sits on top. So keep pulling. Pull the tail out. There you go. Super. So that's your start. Now if you pull that's relatively solid.
You probably can't tell by how baffled I look, but I loved my short time as a sailmaker. The work is satisfying and tactile, punching through the sail material with the needle and running the thread through the wee beeswax, that was class. Rubbing the seams flat with the tools. It's satisfying to see your progress, and it's interesting and varied work, at least the small part that I did. Sailmaking was a long job, taking 25 years to master. However, by that time, you'd most likely be managing the loft, talking to customers, organising supplies, and rubbing shoulders with the Admiralty. Master sailmakers were highly respected, and you could become very wealthy if you ran a good business and you befriended the right people. The job was hard, but relatively safe. You worked with the same group of people from morning till lunch, took your midday meal, and then came back to resume the job. Conversation was encouraged to help pass the time, and it was meaning that you were more likely to get to work if you were a good conversation and you knew a good pub to recommend.
Do you think
Lovely.
this is a job you could do, Kyle?
I think this is a job that I would enjoy. Yeah, absolutely. You can probably tell already, but the Sailmaker is the one to beat. Money, status, safety, plus good stories and pints with the boys. It's an S tier. Come on. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us today. Big thank you to Chalke History Festival, and especially to the living historians who are keeping these valuable trades alive and showing a desk jockey like me that, hey, I contain multitudes and I can do anything I set my mind to, as it turns out. If you'd like to hear a little bit more about Chalke History Festival, please click the link in the description to find out more, and maybe, hey, come next year when it's on. And don't forget to tell us in the comments below what your favourite job was and what you think you could do. But I think that's everything for now, so until next time, we'll see you later. Thank you for joining. And at the end of this, we should go see those sheep. That's right.